welcome to the Arranging Video Game Music for Strings panel. I'm Alex. I'm a college professor and a film composer. I have a PhD in music from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and I'm lucky enough to continue to live in LA. Beautiful weather this time of year. And let's have my colleague introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Wesley. I teach, I perform, and I play piano music, chamber music, orchestral music, whatever the situation calls for.
He's a genius. He knows everything. Today we're going to be talking about arranging VGM for strings. We're going to be talking about this through the lens of a big project that we did, actually especially for MAGFest, which is the Undertale String Orchestra project. This was commissioned by the Videri String Quartet. Please give them a round of applause. This is extremely important. If you take one thing away from today's presentation, is come to the reading at 5 o'clock in the room next door. That's the most important thing. The Videri String Quartet is going to be leading the reading session. It's going to be conducted by our dear friend and colleague Michael Klinberg, who I saw around here. Oh, okay, he's being very responsible. So anyway, the reason why you should come, actually let's do a little poll. How many of you here are musicians? Wow, I'm like literally beaming right now. That's so cool. Okay, I'm really excited. How many of you are string players? Fantastic. Okay, and how many of you would consider yourself some kind of composer, arranger, recomposer? Wow. Okay, I'm like almost in tears. It's so cool. All right, I really like MAGFest. This is great. So this project is the Undertale String Orchestra project was commissioned by the Videri String Quartet, written by me and Wesley. It's a multi-level arrangement for virtuoso players, as well as elementary and intermediate players. Performing the same music but at an appropriate level so everybody can play together and have a really good time. And so I'm a professor, so I like to try to stay a little organized when presenting materials. There's a fun little twist though that's going to make this very interesting, so just hang on for a second. So there's basically 4 big chunks of this presentation. We're going to talk about the concept and the planning of this project. Key points are really small. I should have made them bigger. Hopefully you have good vision over there on the stage left. We're going to talk about the construction. You'll get to see a little behind the scenes look into the process of writing like a big project like this from a professional composer standpoint. We're going to talk about how notation is life. If you're a musician, you know how important good notation is. And then we're going to talk about something that I feel is often overlooked, which is the editing process, and like communicating with people you're working with, and like just having a good experience. So if this seems a little dry, and if you're not particularly impressed by me and Wesley, I have great news for you, which is that we have a couple of co-presenters today, which are my cats. Yes. I think we're all familiar with the trope of if you have 2 cats, one is a sweet little angel, and one is a little demon gremlin that just ruins your entire life. I will let you figure out through the images which one is which here, and it'll be continued. For any particular dry slides, I'll have some support from a cat, and you can look at a cat picture while I'm talking about something kind of academic. So we're gonna. It's a lot of words. I figured a cat picture might help. So we're going to talk about the background of the project and the workflow. This is kind of just like a little bit further in-depth overview, and then we'll really get into the nuts and bolts and the granular of this project. So we came up with this idea, I think like maybe 6 months ago or something. Rosie, Alan, and I were talking with Wesley, and we were thinking how cool it would be to have like video game music for strings, but like also in an educational way, but like with like parts that a virtuoso, like professional quartet could come in and like use it as a teaching experience for people who are like newer to playing string instruments. And we had several meetings about this, and we discussed musical architecture and all of that, and we came to an idea. All of this, we're going to go more in depth later. The next stage after that was the planning. I was largely responsible for the planning of this, and you can tell the planning is very exciting because the first bullet point is file management. Yes, file management, very good. I teach composition, and I tell for those of us who are composers in the room, the most important thing if you're creating music is please manage your files carefully. It's really important to make sure you know where to find them, make sure you... Yeah, the number of students I've had, it's like, composition assignment, parentheses 1, parentheses 2, parentheses 3, .mp3 is not good. In addition to, part of the planning process, especially when you're working on a project with multiple people, is thinking about the team skills as well as differing skill sets. So Wesley and I have been working together for about 10 years now. We've known each other for much longer than that, for better and for worse. And so it's a joy to work with Wesley. It's a tremendous privilege. But we have some skills that we're both really good at. So we're both good at conceptual design, thinking about how to compose a piece and how it should be structured. We're both very good orchestrators, and we're both very organized, which is kind of part of the general skill set for a composer. But we have some things that we're just better at than the other person. So we both write pretty fast, but Wesley is an extraordinarily fast writer. Wesley is in my opinion, he's a little bit more of a creative arranger than I am. He's also very efficient. He can create arrangements very accurately, very quickly, so they don't take really that much editing. Speaking of editing, I'm better at editing. I really enjoy doing that and getting in there and making little changes. I'm also really good at optimization. It says optimization on the slide if you're taking a picture of it, but the real word for that is making things easier to play. It's making it more playable. I play several different instruments. I forgot to mention, we're both pianists by training, and pianists and composers. Our primary instruments are piano, but I also play violin, still play violin, not as well as I used to, but I studied violin for 15 years, through college, and so I have some background. I can play a little bit. I also really like doing the communication. Mr. Chatterbox up here, I really like working with the players and talking about the music and organizing meetings and just getting people organized and excited about a project. So,
for the more experienced among you already know this, but just for all of our friends here, if you're thinking about getting into arranging or composing, one of the reasons that Alex has stated that the two of us feel so fortunate is that we were able to find a partner that complements and supplements our skill sets in such an effective way. Now, you do not need to be good at all of these things. No one is, and that is perfectly okay. If you're working solo or as part of a team, just remember that you keep these things in mind. If you don't think about it, that is a vulnerability. If you're thinking about it, that's one way you can get better.
Being aware of what you are good at and what you are not good at is really critical in just every part of your life, but especially as a composer, you have to do a lot of different things. Okay, the planning took a long time, both in the presentation and in real life. The construction phase, which is actually writing music, was pretty quick actually. It was less than a month. Wow, this is an amazing accompaniment, it's so cool. The construction phase, phase 1 was writing the virtuoso versions. That took about 2 weeks. Wesley and I split that up. I'll explain that further. And then the phase 2 was creating we started calling them, we were running through the presentation earlier, we started calling them hard mode for the virtuoso versions, and then the normal mode and the easy mode for these pieces. So the intermediate and the elementary levels, that took about 3 weeks. I took the lead on that, but it ended up being a little bit more work than I was anticipating. It was a lot of music, and so I called in my assistant Vivian to help me out, who's one of my composition students, which was super helpful to just have somebody do a little bit of this and that here and there, so I could really focus on a specific task. Was very helpful. The last 2 parts were the editing. I took the lead on the editing because I was the last person to handle the music, and I like editing and in second draft, so we sent things to Videri, got some feedback, and did some fixes, and then the finalization, we actually did last week. Alan, Mr. Cello Man up here, helped me out with generating nice clean parts and things, making sure things were looking really good. So let's talk about the concept. How do you come up with a arrangement like this? How does this even start? Wesley, why don't you take us away?
This is one of my favorite things that really gets my blood going. I like thinking high concept. So, for instance, what tracks do you choose to represent? Are you choosing one or multiple? So I kind of broke them down into things that I think are important to me, perhaps important to you as well. Something I like to call the topic, which was actually covered by our illustrious colleague Michael in his wonderful panel the other day. Topic can relate to essentially things that are maybe related to the music but aren't strictly music related, extra musical, you might say. For example, what's the music about? What kind of things might tie into it in terms of narrative? We'll talk more about that in later slides. Let me get through this. What's the experience? The experience of the audience, of course. What kind of product do you want them to receive? And then, what's the situation? What are you composing? What are you arranging for? Again, to be covered later. Let's talk about topic. Here are the couple of different ways I like to organize my arrangements, or as we like to call them, recompositions. This is, of course, assuming that you're choosing multiple tracks, which is something that I like to do. One particular arrangement I like called The Journey is when you might take, some of your favorites, the greatest hits, the most popular or the most meaningful selections from a particular soundtrack, and to arrange them in various ways. I've listed chronologically as an example, but there are other ways that you can consider as well. The example that's on the board is actually something that I did for a Breath of the Wild arrangement that I did some time ago, but let me bring up an example that's a little bit more current. There's the one for, there's the one for the boss rush that happens in the Undertale that we're going to be showing later, which takes you on a journey, but it's themed after the different bosses that you're going to encounter through the game. So it's sort of like a quasi-cinematic approach where you get a sort of playthrough, a condensed experience of the game as you listen to the arrangement. That's related, of course, to the other kind of organization, the overarching theme. You can find a narrative motif in the example that I've just presented, boss themes, right? But something that I find also really interesting is you don't have to limit this to a single soundtrack. You can bring in soundtracks from a variety of different series. I'm a Nintendo nerd, so I'm going to speak on what I know. The way that Pokemon, the way that Zelda, the way that lots of other games treat combat musically are very different. That might be very fertile ground for compare and contrast. Consider this when you select your tracks. You can, of course, just select ones that you really like, but it adds an extra layer of interest in the listener if you're saying, oh, look at all of these different tracks that there's a message I'm trying to convey. That's something that you can explore outside of the music and inside of it, which I find particularly fascinating. As for how to treat these themes, well, when I first started arranging music, I did a lot of this, and I still see a lot of it in arrangers to today, which is you'll take a bunch of themes and then play them back to back. There's completely fine, nothing wrong with that. But something that I find particularly interesting is if you do something slightly more advanced or sophisticated. Show of hands. Does the word, who's familiar with the word counterpoint? Wonderful. But just to make sure I keep all the bases covered and I won't leave anyone out, Alex, in a sentence or two, could you define counterpoint briefly?
So counterpoint is when you have multiple what are called lines of music, sometimes melodies or like combinations of notes that are independent, happening at the same time, they're interesting on their own, but happening at the same time. And counterpoint, it describes a phenomenon of what it sounds like when those two musics are happening together at the same time, usually planned, unlike what we have going on right now with drum set and video game music arranging.
That's a form of polyphony as well. We're very fortunate again to have tremendously excellent Videri players with us today, offering their support. Matthias, if you're available, could you please demonstrate just the top line of what's on the board? I think we can all agree, gorgeous on its own, completely nothing wrong with that. But listen to what happens if you simply overlay another equally important, wonderful theme directly on top of it. Eli, if you could support us along with Matthias.
Sure.
think about just how many avenues of possibility that opens up. Now you're talking about perhaps an exploration of two different characters, two different places. You're talking about also strictly musical things, like how this opens up the rhythm, how this opens up harmonic possibilities, and also just polyphony sounds cool. The more of it you have, the fancier you sound.
I just want to say that we kind of sprung the idea of having Videri like play these examples for us like today, and so whatever you see, whatever you hear from Videri in this presentation, they're sight reading off of the projector, so they're extraordinary.
All right. Now, this is related not only to arrangement, but to composition. It's one of the reasons why we like referring to arrangement as recomposition. Something that my teachers like to talk to me a lot about is something called the flow of energy. And my favorite analogy might be to think of rides from a theme park. You have pieces that are like roller coasters. They're action-packed, adrenaline thrill rides from beginning to end. You have dark rides that perhaps tell a more emotionally diverse story. And of course, you have hybrids, something that I like to call a balanced diet, lots of different things involved. If you're thinking about these things and aren't sure where to begin, my two top sources for research are classical music and film. What do they have in common? Well, they're both experiences that you experience through time, so they have to manage your energy as they go along. And especially in the case of classical music, I know it's old, but that means it's tried and true. You have hundreds of years worth of people having tried, failed, and succeeded. And if you know a song that you really like from the canon, experiment with it, research it, find out what you like about it, and try to apply it to your own arrangements. And then I'd also like to talk about musical features. Think about the track or tracks that you're trying to represent or arrange. What about them is so appealing to you? Is it the melody? Is it the harmony? Is it the rhythms? Try to isolate one or just a few of these things, because the more that you can separate your version of whatever it is that you're doing, makes it more original, makes it more engaging for the performers so that they don't feel like they're just doing a cover of something you can easily find a million of on YouTube. I'm looking at you, Gerudo Valley arrangers, right? And think about a way that you can perhaps merge it with a style that is slightly unexpected. What does this sound like as a waltz? What does that sound like as a march? All of these stylistic choices are not essential if they are already part of the original. You can make your own transformation and make it something that is really uniquely your own and memorable. And then finally, I'd like to talk about liminal spaces. We all know that the beginning of something is super important. We all know that the ending of something is super important. This is why transitions are extra important, because they're both of those things at the same time. You have to think about how you end a section of a piece of music and how you start the next one. Transitions are some of the most difficult things in my experience to manage, because then you have to think about things like, oh, are the keys of the tracks different? Oh, are the meters, the rhythms, the speed different? But these are wonderful opportunities. These are things to embrace, not to be frightened by. Think about how you might be able to introduce new and interesting relationships. And something that I would encourage you to try not to do unless you have a particular special effect you want to achieve. Do not just play one track and then stop and then start a new one, because that interrupts the flow of it. It can take the audience, the listener, out of the experience. So you only really want to do that when you want to introduce contrast, or if the two things dovetail into each other so nicely that you don't have to do anything. But we can only hope to be so lucky.
I always tell my composition students the most interesting part of any piece of music is the transitions. Being able to connect two musical ideas or two musical sections is a mark of your skill as a composer. And it's an opportunity for you to really be inventive with how you're composing or recomposing material. You can layer them. You can you can break them down and have like them interject with each other. You can jam them right up next to each other. The possibilities are pretty endless. And so when you're arranging and you're like, oh, I really want to put these together, really don't be afraid of the transitions. Like, enjoy them, and if you're newer to composing or you're sometimes still a little scared of them, I'm still a little scared of them sometimes, don't be. It's actually, that is where you really show your craft, that's where you really learn. I also want to talk a little bit about endings. There's these different moods that you can have for your arrangement, these different flow of energies. When you're beginning or ending a piece, do not be afraid to change it up a little bit. If you have like a really powerful, supercharged rock music, drum set heavy arrangement that you are writing for a variety of instruments, you can try ending it with a little bit of a different vibe. Try ending it meditatively or a little more grounded. Players really like it when there's contrast through their arrangements because it makes it feel more like a complete piece, like a little balanced meal or a nice little snack. And having like moments like this makes it musically more sophisticated and interesting.
I'm also thinking about writing something that's meditative throughout and then jump scaring people at the end. Watch out.
So, the situation, this is really critical. If you are, regardless of whether or not you're writing an arrangement for yourself to play, either for recordings or live, or if a friend asks you to write something, or you're commissioned by a professional string quartet, you need to think about the practical, the boring stuff, okay? You don't just sit down and write art. You have to, unfortunately, you have to plan it out a little bit. You gotta do some organization and file management first. When you are privileged enough to have clients, you want to ask them a lot of questions, but you can also ask yourself these questions. In fact, you should be asking yourself these questions before you write to really make an effective arrangement. So the first one is the runtime. A lot of composers dramatically underestimate how important it is to be able to write an exact amount of music. Oftentimes when someone's asking you to write something, they want to play it, hopefully, but the thing is they may only have a few minutes in a given concert or a given program to squeeze it in. So if you're asked for a 3-minute piece and you provide a 6-minute one, that person is going to ask you to cut it down, or else they won't be able to play it. It's actually something they teach you in composition school, is you really have to learn how to write at a specific number of minutes. So if you're kind of testing the waters and you're starting to arrange yourself, set yourself a number. Be like, I'm going to write 4 minutes of music, and see if you can fill it up or cut it down to that time exactly. It's really important. You should also talk with your performer or think to yourself about what is the context, what's the occasion of this arrangement. Is this something that's I'm going to put on TikTok? That's really going to affect how long it is, right? It's probably 30 seconds or a minute, right? Is this something that's going to be played on a concert, right? Maybe that's going to be a little bit longer. That's going to change not only its length, but also who it's written for, how it's written. I also like to think about the performers. Who is playing it? Is it you? Then you should write something you're good at. If it is someone you don't know so well, or if it's one of your friends, you should ask them, hey, what are you good at? Can you send me some recordings of you playing so I can write something that's effective for you? And also, something that I tell my students all the time is be aware of whether or not your arrangement is going to be rehearsed. This is a huge thing. A lot of composers will write really hard arrangements without realizing that there may not be time to rehearse it, okay? Or there may be very limited rehearsal. So if you're writing something with limited rehearsal, it's probably going to be a little bit easier.
This is something that I, again, feel extremely fortunate about working with Alex on, because when I first started off arranging, I wrote for myself because I perform myself. And so a lot of the things that you need to not take for granted, I did, because I didn't have to think about them. I knew them intuitively. This is why communication is, and I cannot stress this enough, extremely important. So ask your performers as many questions as you can think of. You may not get all the answers you're looking for. In fact, maybe you won't get many at all. But if you don't ask, you will get exactly 0 answers, and then you may end up writing something that you're very happy with that doesn't work, and that would be an unfortunate situation, best to be avoided.
So we're going to breeze through the construction a little bit here so that we can get to kind of the nitty-gritty of writing for strings. We have some interesting slides and some interesting demos, which I'm sure a lot of you are very curious about. So construction phase 1. Wesley and I, this is writing the virtuoso, the hard mode parts. for this. We had to select and order the tracks. We worked with Videri and we decided that a 6-movement suite or a set of 6 pieces was ideal, and each with a specific theme. They wanted each piece to be around 3 to 5 minutes, so we ended up writing, I think, like 20 minutes of music or something total. And we had a little bit of a time crunch, so we had to divide up who was writing what. So I took, Wesley had a very clear idea of 5 of the movements. So I took the one which was Megalovania. I wrote the majority of that to, it wasn't quite as strongly themed. And then I took another movement, and then Wesley did the other 4. Why don't you talk about these?
Because I had pre-selected which tracks that were important to me, and also with the help of our wonderful performers who offered their favorite selections as well, we had to be flexible with other things. You do not need to be literal to the original. One thing that is really important to be flexible with is the key of the tracks you're playing with. Not all keys are created equal. Not all are equally performable or effective, depending on the situation.
Depending on the instrument, too.
Yes, very much. And they may not work in sequence. So transpose. Use what I like to call modulation buddies. Alex, perhaps you'd like to talk a little bit about keys that are good friends with one another.
Oh, yes. So this is a concept that I love introducing to my composition students, which is when you're writing a piece, you usually want to change key or move to a different key, like a different set of notes. But there's often a lot of questions about which one to go to. Right? The choices are infinite, as you can see here. It's a very complicated diagram. This is called the circle of fifths, and this basically shows you what keys are close to each other. What does it mean when a key is close to each other? If you think about C major, anybody know what the notes of C major are? Like what notes are in the key of C major, the scale? It's C, D, E, F, G.
How many accidentals?
0. 0 sharps and flats. Wow, excellent. So if you think about, let's think about G major for a second. Okay, G major has how many accidentals? 1. Okay. Wow, it's all so good. I'm so excited for the reading. So G major and C major, G and C seem kind of far apart, but and they have that F sharp that's really different. But if you think about the set of pitches that are contained in each of these keys, they actually share 6 notes in common. So that's why C and G are right next to each other on the circle of fifths, is because their neighbors are actually closely related. And so the further away you get from a given key, your starting key, so if you're starting in C major, the harder it is going to make it, be to make it sound natural, to make it sound like it's moving organically to the next key. It's possible, but it might sound a little jarring.
Is this also true if you're moving from major to minor?
Yes, major to minor. So if you may be familiar that every major key has a minor key that is literally related. So for C major, that's A minor. The reason they're called relative keys is they actually have all the same notes, just in a slightly different order. So an A minor scale is just a C major scale, but it starts on A and uses all the same notes.
Didn't think you were going to be learning music theory today. I'll cut this briefly. We have a lot more stuff to cover. Sketch all your important ideas first, all the most prominent features. So, who's getting the melody? Who's doing support? Who's providing rhythmic texture? All of that stuff. Sketch the important things first before you get too much into the weeds, because that gives you the big picture, which saves time. And so you're not just doing bar by bar and going, oh, where do I go from now? Get the entire thing first, because that makes it also much easier to curate. If, this section is too long, you can see it, you can trim it, you can extend it, do lots of manipulation with it. Get your big ideas down first.
So the next stage of construction was optimizing what we started calling the A arrangements, the virtuoso ones. This was rewriting some passage work. Passage work is a fancy name for just a bunch of notes that appear in sequence. Rewriting some of that for timbre. Timbre, this is going to be the weirdest sentence you hear today. Timbre is, the way I like to define it is, it's how sound sounds. So basically, timbre is what makes a trumpet sound different from violin. There's like a bunch of science and stuff behind that, the overtone series, but this is a different presentation. So the next year. I also had to adjust some rhythmic notation to make it easier to read, given the situation, the occasion, which is a bunch of people who've never played together before just reading it at a big conference. Creating the B parts, the intermediate level parts, or the normal mode parts, are mostly the same as the A parts, but a lot of the most difficult things are removed, like things that are really high up, or a lot of some of the really difficult passage work. And they're either rewritten or removed. And then the C-level parts are for beginner players, if you're new to your string instrument, or if it's, you're bringing this to a school. An elementary string player, this is something that's really important for you to know if you are thinking about writing an easier version of something. If you're, you want to minimize the use of the fourth finger, so the pinky finger in the left hand. You want to maximize the use of open strings, which we'll talk about shortly, and then you want to simplify the rhythms, which is what we did. And so I want to show you a couple examples of this. This is sort of original version of part of the last movement called Metaton. Mateus, would you mind playing this? He's sight reading, and this is not very well optimized.
Is there a key signature?
No, there's no key signature, and there's treble clef. Sorry, it's just it's a weird cut.
Is there a key signature?
No.
No?
Nope. It's normally in D minor. But. Okay, well you played that perfectly, so there goes my point. I'm very privileged writing for an insane professional string quartet, but that's pretty hard. I took out my violin and tried to play it, and I couldn't do it, and so I was like, I probably should rewrite this. So your players, if you're a player at my level who's no longer very good, you might get this kind of look from them. So that was optimized into this. I was lucky I had 3 violin parts, and you don't have to demonstrate this one. Everybody's gonna play this later. But the top part is the A part, so it's a lot easier. I'll explain why later. The second one is the B part, and then the lowest one, the C part, is the simplest one. And not unfortunately, the whole time I was writing out this passage, I was just thinking about this meme. It's okay to write it like an easy part. It's okay. Sometimes some parts need to be easy. Even for the professionals, sometimes they like a moment of break, okay? And then, that's Sushi. She's okay. Anyway, we'll talk about rhythm in a little bit. We'll get back to that slide. Here's an example, just a quick look of what the viola parts look like. So you can see the top part, they're playing all these eighth notes. It's, not super hard, but it's a little tricky. The viola B part is literally playing 25% fewer notes, and the viola C part is playing about half the number of notes. Okay, but you can see they're all lined up in the right spot. Okay, what you're here for. Strategies for writing for strings. Open strings, this is really important. Does everyone know what I mean when I say open strings? So open strings, the way that string instruments are built is they all have 4 strings, and an open string is when they're moving their bow across that string and they're not putting any of their fingers down. It's really important to know the exact notes that each of those open strings is tuned to. In fact, if you're writing for strings, it's so important that I designed an acronym for my composition students to remind you of how important open strings are. Okay, it's really easy to remember. It's really going to help you out. So it's ABTAUS OED ZWBM. It stands for always be thinking about open strings, or else Dr. Zhu will be mad. So if you're not thinking about open strings, I will personally be angry. Thank you. Okay, but more seriously, so always, if you take the second thing you need to remember from today, other than to go to the reading in 20 minutes, is always know what string you are writing on. Okay, so what string is that note on? Okay, this is so hard at the start, especially if you don't play a string instrument. But if you are not aware, you are not thinking hard enough. Okay, this is the first step into writing really well for strings, is to know what string you're on. Thinking in fifths above the open strings is called first position. So if you're on the A string on the violin, you would go A, open string, B, C, D, E. That's a fifth. Okay, so that's the range in first position. If you're writing for more advanced players, they can play in other positions. The most common positions actually through the intermediate level are first position and third position. You may want to take a violin lesson or ask the Videri folks about it later if you're curious. I want you, if you're new to writing for strings, default to thinking in first position. Okay, you don't want to write anything too challenging unless you're friends with a violinist or a violist or a cellist. My rule for my composition students is kind of a hard rule. No, if you don't know what double stops are allowed, you are not qualified to write double stops. Okay? If you don't, thank you. So if you don't know which ones work, if you're like, you're definitely going to write one that doesn't work. And there's no faster way to make a string player angry than a double stop that's impossible. If you want to write some double stops, the good first step is to include an open string with your double stop, so one of the strings that are just naturally tuned on the instrument. But they need to be one string apart. They can't play a double stop that's one string and then skipping a string. It's impossible. And then if you're a little bit more advanced, thirds and sixths are generally pretty comfortable, but it depends on where on the instrument and what key you're in, so just be careful. It's always best to ask first. And then now this is really the meat of the presentation. I think we're going to go over by a couple minutes. I apologize. But the string crossings is like level 2. Okay, crossing the string takes some practice for all string players, and even for professional ones, it's possible that some string crossings are impossible. And so the example that I had Mateus play earlier is not easy because the string crossings are bad. So I drew a little diagram here. I mapped out what string each of these notes are on in that passage I had him play earlier. And you can see it's E, A, E, E, A, E, and that's good because it's easy to say. But then it gets kind of gnarly. It goes E, A, E, E, A, E, E, A, A, and it gets kind of hard to predict. The bolded letters are the accented notes, and the underlined letters are the beats, which are also important to consider for string crossings. So this is not particularly good string writing. A professional could play it, but they won't like you very much, which explains a lot about me, and they might make this face if they see it. So the optimized version for multiple players is much better. You can see that the bold notes and the underlined notes the bold strings and underlined strings are lined up more, so the accents are happening on the beat, and you can see it's not a continuous stream of sort of random 16th notes, but there's like a pattern with little breaks that allow them for it to be optimized. And you can see the C level part, still very easy, right? It's all on the D string. Don't be afraid of that. It's totally okay to have a part for, things. I don't want to discourage anyone from playing the C parts. Like, I would have to play the C part, so please feel free to play it. Okay, let's talk about notation is life. I'm going to breeze through this. Notating music well as a composer or arranger is the equivalent of playing in tune. It's the equivalent of not playing any wrong notes. It's the equivalent of having good rhythm. It is your technique as a composer, okay? You have to know how to write music down well. It can help or harm your players. And it's the difference between a good experience and a bad experience for a performer. If it's poorly notated, some players, Rosie was telling us a story, she got something that was really, really, really poorly notated, and she actually said, I'm not going to play it. And that's professional standard. If it's unreadable, they're not going to play it. So make sure you really master your notation. Otherwise, my cats will be mad.
Something I like to remind my students of, notation is just another word for instructions. And if you're giving someone instructions, like in a script for a movie, make them as clear, as concise, and easy to follow as possible. And consistent.
All right, so now it's time for audience participation. Can we please clap this rhythm? Okay, here, I'm going to count to 4, and let's all clap it together. You ready? With the drum set. All right, 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, that was actually pretty good. The reading's going to go well. So, not the easiest. You might have this reaction. Let's try this one now. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Wow, that was perfect. That was really good. Okay, I'm really excited for the reading now. So this is the same rhythm, but this one is notated better. It's notated to be more clear. This one is actually not incorrect, and this could be used in certain contexts, but it's not good for a specific occasion that we're doing. Okay, so notation is life and death. Here's another example of some violin parts. You can see the violins have offset eighth notes and eighth rests, but the A and B parts have those, but the C parts have quarter notes with a slightly simpler rhythm. Okay, you'll see this a lot in the parts in the reading later. That the C parts have the rhythms are the same, but they're notated slightly differently to be easier to read for a beginner player. Okay. Let's talk about editing. When you're editing, if you're working for a client or something, schedule a meeting, like talk about it in person. It's very difficult to edit over email. If you're a composer, take feedback graciously. We're all very, very lucky to be able to work with people who play instruments really well. If you're writing, it's a privilege to compose. Sometimes, however, the composer is right. The customer is always right, but sometimes the composer is right. If you compose carefully with intention, sometimes a player may be a little confused by something you've written, but if you're able to explain it, if you really thought about it, and you thought about it correctly, you'll be able to justify your choices. So really compose with intent. Okay, this is actually like actual screenshots from the edits. So this is an edit requested in the viola part. I got turned into this. Alan, could you play this? I put this in just to annoy him. So this is technically playable, and Alan is technically, he has a PhD in cello performance, so he can play this, but he doesn't want to, but I'm going to make him do it anyway, so go. Okay, that's still pretty good. Okay.
Nailed it.
Yeah, he actually nailed it. Man, they're really messing with me today. So I was requested to rewrite it to this. Can you play this one? It's the same thing. It's the one you played earlier. Yeah. So exactly the same effect, but without raising your cellist blood pressure. You know. The reason this one is bad. Can anybody tell me why this one is bad? I heard somebody say too many string crossings. Yes, very good. You're having to cross like a gazillion strings, like 100 strings to get up to that high F from D2. So don't do that. Okay. Oh wow, that's it. That's the whole presentation. Conclusions. One thing that's not on any of the slides is if you're not sure how to write for strings, there's three ways to remedy that. You can learn how to play a string instrument yourself. You don't need to take a lot of lessons. Take lessons for 3 months or 6 months, just to kind of learn the basics of getting around the instrument. That is the fastest way to learn how to write for a string instrument. You can also take composition lessons. A huge part of composing lessons is learning how to write for different instruments, right? If you're a composer, you have to basically know everything, which I do not, so I'm still learning. And then another great way to learn how to write for strings is to ask your string player friends. Make string player friends. Talk to them, show them the music you're writing, be like, hey, is this playable? And then if it's not playable, apologize profusely, run back to your computer, fix it, and then ask them to buy them a coffee or something. So any questions?
Yes, sir. On using open strings, is there any, I always think always play close to it. Like how would you notate that if you wanted that?
Oh, most players, that's a great question. So the question was, how do you notate an open string? Most of the time, the default mode is you don't need to write it down. Players just automatically, I wouldn't say they default to open strings, but they'll use them if there's a note that is an open string, would normally be played, but an open string they'll use it about 70% of the time. You can also play the same notes that are open strings on other strings using the fingers.
Yeah, I was just thinking like, my G is kind of fuzzy, so I like to close it.
Mm.
That kind of thing.
Yeah,
Or maybe I want it here because it's got that sharp quality, and I want to,
My suggestion is when you're composing is to not over direct or not over instruct your players, especially if you're writing for people who are skilled, right? Taking lessons for a number of years. Like Alan, who's had lessons for a few years, right, to play the cello. Usually they'll be able to figure it out themselves. And like you were saying, your G's buzzy, right? Your G might be buzzy, but somebody else's might not be, right? And so if you're writing for yourself, you can make that marking. But if you're writing for somebody else, maybe you don't need to. Yeah. Question? Yes. Writer's block. Oh, I love this. Why don't you start? I've writer's block about answering.
I counter writer's block by consuming more. Because there's always going to be things that pique your interest, right? And if something that you feel passionate about makes you feel a certain way, maybe that's something that's worth pursuing. But of course, if you encounter writer's block, it might be for a variety of different reasons. The one that I can think of that might happen to me the most is if I'm just frozen. I don't know what to put onto the page because it's blank. In which case, put something shitty down and fix it later.
Yeah, just start. The other thing I like to point out to my students is there's nothing new that's ever been composed. Everything has already been composed multiple times. When I was on the plane over here, I watched Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, great movie. And I was listening to the Hobbit's theme, like when Gandalf's going through the Shire and his little cart. And he said, "Wizards never played." I was like, I've heard this before. And I was playing Breath of the Wild the day before, and the Shire theme is the same as the theme as Hateno Village. It's in the same key, it's the same violin solo. Go listen to those two later.
Same interval, same everything.
Everything is, yeah. So if you're looking for, if you have writer's block, but you sort of know what you might want to write, go model after something else.
This is not a bad thing. It does not detract from the value that you bring to the world through your work. It just makes more of that thing that was so great in the first place. No one complains about there being more cheese. I love cheese. More, please.
Another question? Yes. Are you asking about how long it took us to write? Yes, they do. Bass is actually even more complicated because sometimes their tuning is different. Like their open strings vary depending on whether they're playing an orchestra or chamber music, and their string crossings vary depending on whether they're holding the bow like this or like this. And I saw, it's pretty complicated. I counter this by writing very easy bass parts. I don't write anything too complicated for the bass, and I have several bassist friends. We can talk more about it later, but really you have to talk to who's playing and see like what they're looking for. I think maybe we have time for 2 more questions. Blue shirt in the back.
Yeah, I have a quick question about like the different parts for the A, B, and C. So are you talking about like if there's like 3 like violin, like 3 string players playing together, or like was that like 5 or something? Just like different. If you're trying to arrange for different skill levels.
So you're asking like what the context is for these A, B, and C parts? So all 3 of them are going to be played at the reading that's happening in 9 minutes. Don't forget, the most important thing. But I also, when I was engineering the B and the C parts, I made it so that the piece would still sound good with either just A and B or just A and C. In fact, it would still sound good even with just B and C as well. It's a few things, like really colorful things would be missing, but I had to work pretty carefully to make sure that like all the material was being covered, even with like any of the parts missing, basically. So. One more. You, sir, with the hoodie. Yes.
How do you gain the skill of knowing what your arrangement's going to sound like beforehand? Like as a hobbyist here, we rarely have the opportunity to have like a string quartet come play, right? And you have to like change the arrangement after hearing it.
So we're really blessed these days to have MIDI playback. It's horrible. Somebody wants to listen to MIDI playback, but that'll give you kind of a sense of like what, if you're at least using like the right notes and the right rhythms. But even if you are, so like I'm a professional composer and I teach composition. Even for me, occasionally something that you wrote down will be interpreted in a way that is slightly unexpected for what you wrote. So in Metaton, the 5th movement, when I had written it, I was thinking to myself, the 16th notes are probably going to be détaché, which is kind of longish bows, like not bouncing with this bow. But the players defaulted to doing off the string, which is actually either one of those is possible. And sometimes you'll be slightly surprised by something, and you can always, when you're working with players, you can always say, oh, hey, could you play that more on the string? It could be a little more connected. And then if you are, the way that live music works is if you want to hear what it's going to sound like live, you will, even if you are really good at audiating, imagining what it's going to sound like in your head or when you're looking at the music, it's always going to be different when a person who is not you is playing it. And so that's what MAGFest is for, though, is making friends and being like, hey, can I get your number? Can I get your Instagram handle? And if you live in my city, can we, can you play some music? Or can we play some music together? Music is like a community thing, right? And that's why it's so cool, and that's why we're all here. So I'll take one last question. Yes, you, sir, in the back. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, you must be. My peripheral vision is not very good. Why don't you? Yeah.
Can you go back to the passage you had Alan play?
Oh, yeah.
Can you try something, Alan, for me?
Whoa, yes. Make him work.
Low notes, can you left hand hits the first beat of each?
Left hand pits the downbeat?
So left hand hits the other downbeat, so you do the E. Left hand hits the D.
If it was an open string, that would be
If it was an open string, it would be possible, but as they're all noted, like I had to press down all of them.
I guess just
It
pick the key that's a whole simple.
String players really do not like transposing on the spot. but good effort, though.
yeah, it's especially at the speed that it's at.
Yeah.
It's too fast.
Next, that's actually a good idea. I'm gonna borrow that for the next arrangement. Is have a left hand pits just to make Alan
Like
visible.
it could work, just not in that particular passage.
Yeah, that's a sharp idea. Nice job. Okay, with that. With that, if you want to ask us more questions, we'll be up here for a few minutes. But if you don't have any burning questions, get over there, get your instruments out, rosin up, tune up. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it.